Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I want to make special mention of the MPs who are in the House. Um, MP Kathy, Attorney General, uh, Ianthea Simmons, Wade, um, who else is there? Crystal Caesar, Somerset Girl, West End. So we have, a good representation. And who? Oh, Marcus Jones, Senator. Oh, most of them are West End. And Eugene Dean is in the house. Okay. Um, just to remind you that of the COVID protocols. So keep your distance from one another unless you live in the house with them. So that's okay. We have a short program for you today. And once these people have had the opportunity to speak with you, we will take some comments from those of you who wish to make a presentation. And we ask that you keep it short, ask questions if you might. But our intention, our job here, is to ensure that our alma mater does not go away. So that's why we're here today. And we're hoping that we have a government who listens. Okay, I'm going to ask Glenn Bascom, West End School, to say a short prayer. Sorry, Dr. Glenn Bascom. He says, please.
Good evening, everyone. Believe it or not, I left West End in December 1954. Long time ago. Anyhow, we're going to have a little open prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day you've given each of us in the land of the living, an indication that you're not yet through with what you want to do in us, what you want to do through us. We thank you for the opportunity to have both you in our personal lives and in our national life. We thank you for our school, all of the individuals it has nurtured over the past 150 years. You know the challenge that is before us right now. And Father, every time we sang the school song, we ask you to bless our school, and we would ask that you would continue to do so. You know the challenges that are before us, the concerns of us as citizens, the concerns of the government. And I thank you that we live in a country where we can express ourselves freely. And Lord, I just pray that you would help us as government and people to hear out each other and to do what is best in the long run for everyone. We thank you that we can commit this whole situation to you, knowing that you have the last word. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good evening, everybody. Yep. I'm consigned to 5 minutes and actually tied to a script. So I'm going to try to stay as closely as I can to that script. Don't time me, and I'll try not to edit it. Let me be crystal clear, attendees, that for me, unfortunately, the West End School experience, which of course is immensely huge to everyone here at this end, seems nevertheless to exemplify for me a worrying trend, a summary expression, in fact, of a relentless determination by this current administration to erase and otherwise consign black people's hard-fought for legacies, history, and achievements to the dustbins of nostalgic memorabilia. It's my view. And it didn't just begin yesterday. The West End School you have come to know and love for more than a century and a half. The minister is saying to you that you should take such memories with you to the grave. Your children and great-grandchildren should not have any living proof of such memories. If these are the true sentiments, then I find such a trend offensive in the extreme. For me, even criminal. Injurious to my sense of who we really are, in fact. And from what I've seen, as a young boy, 7, 8, I lived in Bristol Hill. And I left this parish to go to Spanish Point from there. Came back 1 or twice. I've seen changes, major changes. But to be truthful, my heart is still very much in this parish. Insult is added to injury for me. When one intends to replace, in the case of the West End School, those hard fought for achievements, and the West End School's physical location, with an edifice that routinely, up to as late as the 20th century, I think in 1920 or thereabouts, I'm told uncompromisingly rejected on the sole basis of a racist philosophy, blacks and Portuguese, from even setting foot on what these racists considered was hallowed and consecrated grounds, not to be trod by the children that we are now attempting to ensconce there. Foreign consultants, nor uninformed locals, it appears, will not, cannot, and have not appreciated the enormous and binding cultural and community values of such historical and intellectual property assets I mentioned earlier. As a result, it falls to this gathering to do so. It falls to this gathering to put this right. You have a duty to put it right. I'll explain very briefly in the minutes that I'm permitted of a cabinet visit and presentation on Monday, July 19, 2021. It was with those understandings that I articulated earlier, and on behalf of the organizers of this event, that I was asked to present a petition of 325 signatures and a questionnaire. I attended that meeting with 4 gentlemen, Mr. Larry Hunt, Mr. Eugene Mabry, Norbert Simmons, yours truly. We arrived there at 9:30 a.m. We had the meeting under the august shadow of the Sally Bassett statue on Cabinet grounds, where we met the Premier, Minister Ribbon, and Chief of Staff, Ms. Doe Darrell. After a very cordial greeting and reception by the Premier, the delegation presented the Premier and the Minister with the 315 signature petition of the, I'm told I should pronounce it Sands residents and not Sanders residents. In any event, presented as well was the document containing the questions that I mentioned earlier. And those questions and that petition surrounded the transitioning of educational reform. The bulk of these questions, however, were addressed to the specific transition which negatively impacts the West End School, and in particular, the community at large, community in general. A conversation ensued after the presentation, which included the organizers' staunch, principled, and well-articulated opposition to the then impending closure of the 152-old establishment of the many iterations of the West End Primary School. Leading that particular conversation was Mr. Larry Hunt, Mr. Norbert Simmons, and Mr. Mabry. I took an uncharacteristic backseat because I thought these were gentlemen who recently and very much from this side of the island, physically. Those men made it abundantly clear to the Premier and the Minister that the organizers and community of the West End wanted to be meaningfully and integrally involved in any necessary transitioning or educational evolution of the West End School from beginning to end. It was further stressed to the Premier and the Minister that amongst these organizers, there were numerous adept and very experienced educators and others who were ready, willing, and able to assist in the transition and reform generally in the community and particularly of the West End School itself, right through to its reconstruction or construction. The four-man delegation then respectfully requested that the Premier and the Minister respond to the documents handed to them no later than Friday, July 23rd, 2021, in response to a question from the Minister as to whom the contact person was with whom to respond. The name of Miss Ellen Kate Horton, parent-chief, was given by the delegation in response. Apart from a few perfunctory and largely inconsequential inquiries, light banter and comments, the Premier and the Minister remained tight-lipped and non-committal about matters concerning the West End School throughout the meeting, and that's fine. Because of a previously scheduled engagement, I left a few minutes after the Premier's departure, just before 10 a.m. that morning, remaining in conversation with Minister Rebane and the earlier named gentleman. They would have to give you a report of what they discussed. Though I did not view the televised event myself, I am told or informed by colleagues that the Minister appeared the very night of that early morning Monday meeting on July 19, 2021, and told the listening and viewing audience that he had met with a former politician amongst a delegation from the West End School that morning, who told him that their intention was not to be political. If that is true, that is what he reported, then it would be quite unfortunate, unnecessarily combative, and a breach of the good faith built up in the earlier morning meeting on Monday, July 19, 2021, which I thought, in fact, went so well. Your delegation actually said to the Minister words to the effect that we did not wish to politicize or play politics with this very important matter, and decided, in fact, not to include the press. We wanted to have a direct and frank conversation with the Premier and the Minister on behalf of the organizers who sent us. I was merely the messenger. However, it appears that the Minister is more interested in doing just that, playing politics with the educational destiny of this community, and has attempted to use the press to do so. Personally, I won't go down that rabbit hole with him, but we will have one-on-one conversations. That is, he and I. If such a televised meeting was indeed held to that effect, then it is a televised or public event that neither the Premier nor the Minister mentioned to the delegation of the four men that day, or that that meeting would take place that evening or at all. I accordingly leave it to this gathering to ascertain whether or not such omissions, deliberate or otherwise, and premature public disclosure of a privately held meeting with the Premier and the Minister is a collective slap in all of our faces. That's a matter for your consideration, not mine. I've taken my view. I further leave it to the gathering to ascertain whether or not another televised, pre-recorded, pre-packaged disclosure in a public event held on Thursday, July 22nd, 2021, just minutes after 8 p.m., was a decent, respectful, and proper way to answer the SENS residents' petition and questionnaire when the minister announced the final closure of the West End School that evening. As a matter of interest, and to date, there has, to my knowledge, been no formal, direct, and private response from the Premier and or Minister of Education to the petition and the questionnaire that the concerned and affected residents of this parish respectfully and privately presented by way of delegation to them on Monday, July 19, 2021 at 9:30 a.m. as scheduled. If one has been received, then of course I apologize, but I know of none. We got our answer July 22nd. It is now again left to this gathering as to how and in what forms and when it should respond to the behavior described. I'll take my own view and I'll take my own actions. Alone or together with others matters not to me. The future of your children and community for decades, even centuries to come, directly depends on how and for how long you come to meet and finally engage to the end this infernal monster looming large upon your doorsteps. Thank you.
Black people could not go to Sam's Brown. I wonder why they changed it to sound so primary. Nobody seems to know. My Portuguese ancestors could not go to some Sam's Brown. The Portuguese in the Western End, including Zachary Marshall's and family and the Simonses, could not go to Sam's Brown. They also could not go to Port Royal. And if you knew that, they had to go to West End or to Southampton Bleed. All of Bermuda needs to know that. Some of us forget from whence we came. I'm just going to read a few scripts here from the handout. Second page. In 1934, Mr. Charles Snaith was appointed as a principal until his retirement in 1962. He left behind him two notable institutions. The PTA, Parent Teachers Association, was established in 1934. Second oldest on the island. And the school song, God Bless Our School. If you don't have it, I have a copy of this school song here as well. Following his retirement, Mr. Sinclair Richards became the first Bermudian principal of West End. When the school population was escalated, more classrooms were built. And this increase to include a reading room, art room, office, staff room, and assembly hall, a gymnasium. When these extensions had been completed, the infants were transferred to occupy the classrooms in the breezeway, as the new section was called. I have an aside here called Jello, where that was done. It was called the breezeway because it was so breezy and windy here. This is the extension. Mrs. Barbara Rain, a P3 teacher, and Mrs. Galma Bean were opposite each other. And Mrs. Rayner had a science experiment with her children about solids and liquids. Crystal, were you in that class at that time? Anyway, they knew about solids becoming liquids, but they couldn't figure out how in the world a liquid could become a solid. So she brought a couple of packets of Jello to school. The children added the hot water to it, and they left it overnight in the breezeway on the table outside their classroom. When they got to school the next morning, that liquid had turned into a solid. The children were amazed, see, because they didn't have refrigerators these days. And of course, you know, they had an early recess of Jello. And that's how it became the freezeway. But in any case, even though it had been extended, it wasn't sufficient to accommodate the great numbers that had come to be enrolled at West End. The recorded enrollment at that time was 579 students. A new plan had to be implemented to house the overflow. West End became divided at that point. Of course, government purchased prefabricated buildings to put up at Burrs Island to accommodate West End's overflow. And of course, you know, with prefab, it only has a lifespan of maybe 5, 6, 7 years. So they were compelled to go to Burrs Island School. This is West End students had to go to Burrs Island School. So when the time spent for the prefabs had expired, because they had to, you know, knock them down. And by the way, let me just say that those who were lived east of Loyalty, had to go to Burrs Island. They could not go to West End. So when the Burrs Island was closed, instead of encouraging the children, or allowing their children to go back to West End, they upgraded Somerset Primary, did nothing to West End, and of course the children had to go to Somerset Primary. West End were giving all their second-hand tables and chairs and desks. Leftovers. That's how they thought it was then. And now they think we're still leftovers. But they got a lesson to be learned. Their time is coming. The next election will tell. That's my testament to you. Under Mr. Rich's principalship, the first prize-giving ceremony was held to acknowledge student achievement. Musical instruments were introduced, and musical festivals were held. The school crest and motto, "Forward Together," as we are here tonight. And I hope the rest of Bermuda will be in our footsteps, forward together, as we fight this decision. He was the brainchild of Mr. Richards in 1963. And here we are, almost 60 years later, still trying to go forward together. He wished to emphasize the need for teachers, the parents, and the community to work together and embrace each other, so that everyone would maximize the rich educational, and spiritual realms that life has to offer, especially in our community, Sands Parish. And by the way, all you journalists and writers, Sands does not have an apostrophe. Put an L in the paper and get $1 for every time I see Sands with an apostrophe in the paper, and I will be a millionaire in a year. Anyway, Mr. Richards was appointed as an educational officer in 1971 and then chief educational officer in 1976. Then follows Ms. Marsh, Ms. Mandis, Mr. Smith, and so forth. I have with me, check the other one, an old copy of a booklet that was done about 60 odd years ago under Mrs. Mandis. And most of the information in there came from him. She signed Mrs. Van Levine, who's also a former student, Ms. Erladine, a former student at West End, the late Ms. Harry Lightbourne, Mr. Mike Bean, who do all the pictures on the buildings of West End, Ms. Few, Bob Bryant, who was an English teacher there, and myself. And I didn't put everything from here in the new updated one, but it's interesting because in this old one, they have something called the memorable days. And I said, would this be something our President did this? On January 12th, 1909, His Excellency the Governor and his ADC visited the school and presented prizes awarded by the Board of Education for the year ending December 1908. Also present were Reverend Canon McKay, the Inspector of Schools, and Mr. and Mrs. Mizik. And the alums of West End School.
Hello everyone. This is so weird talking publicly. I've done so many presentations for our DA Development Application Board. And yes, Ms. Horton is right. She's the reason why I was able to go and do my master's in planning. It's strange, I have never been brought into the conversation. Wow. Go figure. I work in development control. This is what I do. Wow. Okay, so I speak from not so much a civil servant, but a mom and an alumni. My father is Jovan Benjamin. We are now Bashirs. He was the house captain. All my family, of which we are all educated, went West End, and my children, please stand up. They currently go West End, so it means a lot to me to be a part of this conversation. So I'm just going to ask some questions that were put together, and I'm so honored to be next to Ms. Hunt, Ms. Horton, Mr. Parent. I have an application, I know, for you. It will. Okay, so I'll run through these questions, and then I guess it'll be open mic based on what Ms. Horton has planned for us. Okay, so the first question was, the ministry's vision says that parish primary schools will become the hub of the parish, with parents surrounding neighborhoods, community organizations rallying around the schools, and will collaborate with community partners such as business, local government, and philanthropy, playing a key role with helping each school to ensure students are career, college, and workforce ready. This is not a new vision for West End, which has served both logistically and operationally as a community hub school for the parish for 152 years. West End does not need to become the hub of the parish. It already is. The next point, Why were these community hubs factors in the ministry's own vision actually excluded from the scoring system on which the decision to close West End is based? Why was West End's existing 15 decades as the community school not taking into account the scoring system or recommendation about which school will be saved? Who owns Sumter Primary plus the preschool property? The ministry's advisors who conducted this scoring and made up recommendations, as we know, because I don't remember being involved in this conversation, comprised primarily of expert professionals who have specialized knowledge of buildings and are currently work on the government primary schools on a daily basis. Together, these professionals have more than 40 years of technical work experience in facilities management, estates, property management and maintenance, repairs, renovations, office and school buildings. Who are they? Does anyone know? Why were there no experts who could advise the community history, which was so rich? I had no idea all of that. I mean, gosh, it's very deep and enriched. And other factors that define the ministry's vision for parish primary schools as a parish hub. Why did the recommendations to uplift Sumter Primary not take into account the multi-generational harm? Let me say that again. Multi-generational harm to the community of this school's history of racism. What weight did the advisors give the fact that Sumter Primary scored disadvantages are due to, in part, to school having been privileged with resources over West End? I would just like to add on that topic. I am one of many, and I was at West End, and there were some, like, grassroots teachers, Miss Hunt, Miss Dean, where are you? Miss Beam, Miss Rayner, excellent teachers. A few years ago, and we were producing top-notch students and sports athletes, right? Why were the teachers moved from West End? It was almost like we were targeted. So I feel like we're continuously being targeted. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. Like, why?
They were moved because they wanted the good teachers to go produce elsewhere.
Absolutely. That was the excuse. But I think it's like how they did to Berkeley, the same thing. We were producing too many good G&D, and he was one. I remember you there, Crystal Caesar. Okay. Why did the ministry not consider that uplifting West End School were a form of reparations for decades of government neglect, disrespect, which is what I just said, and underscoring? Why? In the ministry's December 2020 proposal, the recommendation by the advisors to close West End School states that Somerset Primary School achieved a higher score in the 4 of the weighted studies factors categories. The school site has a larger available acreage and capacity for development expansion to accommodate 300 students plus staff. It also has a large playing field that has sufficient outdoor space and preschool located on the site. Why does the ministry insist that primary school is about 1.2 acres bigger than West End, when actually the preschool takes up 0.4 acres, 3/4 of the supposed advantage? Since the preschool will not be demolished, why has the ministry not stipulated that, excluding the acreage consumed by the preschool, the available acreages of West End and some primary sites are practically the same? So I don't buy that one. What is the ministry's advice that a world-class facility and a 21st century education cannot be offered on the West End site, which is marginally smaller? Where West End's 2 school fields taken into account in the scoring system, West End scored 17 points while primary scored 21 points for green field space. If acreage is so important to the capacity of development expansion, why are 2 other parish schools being saved despite their acreage was less than West End? If having a preschool on the site is critically important in the decision, why was it not mentioned in the executive summary of the ministry's proposal? Why is having a preschool on a site necessary and determinant for a West End factor, but not for 2 other parish schools that are being saved? Why is it not possible to build a purpose-built preschool at West End, given the preschool at Somerset Primary site was not purpose-built? The advisors created 19 study factors categories to compare all the schools. It was possible to argue with several other schools where West End was lower than Somerset Primary. 2 stand out in particular: expansion capability and community services. School building location directly within the community with surrounding services such as the supermarket, gas station, church building, residential area, etc. Given the fact that the available acreages of the 2 sites are practically the same, what is the evidence for the school scoring only 13 points in Somerset Primary 22 in the category of expansion capability? Given the fact that both schools are roughly equally distanced from the named community service, what is the rationale? Evidence for West End scoring 15 points for the factor, but Somerset Primary 24 points. 19. Was the fact that West End is much closer within safe walking distance to the preschool club, youth sports programs that take into account the scoring? Was the fact that West End has been the home of the Somerset Brahmins for more than 3/4 of a century, taken into account for the community service category? Given the fact that middle school will not be phased out immediately, did the scoring system fairly and equitably score West End's proximity to older siblings at middle school? No. Did the recommendation take into account the facts that parents reasonably are more inclined to have middle school siblings take care of primary school siblings, which would be my situation, my scenario, as my kids are 1 year apart, than to have primary siblings take care of preschool siblings? If the desired outcome of the school reform is equity, and given the fact that the Somerset Primary's website has already been erased its own history of racism, what is the justification for choosing to house future students of the parish on a very site where their forefathers were forbidden to even walk on the grass? Why is West End a more equitable choice? Why does West End's history of 15 decades of a community hub school not outweigh Somerset Primary's less than 5 recent decades as a desegregated school? Does the ministry have evidence that sense of legacy and pride and sense of place and belonging, all of which have been offered by West End for generations, are irrelevant to the student confidence, development, success, and 21st century education? Did the minister consider that it would be an appropriate form of reparations to uplift and redesign the West End site to continue its 150 years vision and service as the community hub school for the parish? And that would be it for me.
Why, despite a constituency that has solidly supported the political party for decades, is West End again having to fight for its legacy and respect? The community has repeatedly had to resist assaults against the dignity of the school and wisdom of the community. Example, in 1962, architectural folly of the breezeways, which Mrs. Hunt talked about. In the early 1980s, attempt to reduce West End's 2-form entry to 1-form entry while raising Somerset Primary from 1-form to 2-form. The other situation, in 1995, the contemptuous plan to name the new prison at Dockyard West End. How much do we have to endure? I hope this government understands. I'm going to call on Cecily Simmons. MP Jamal Simmons could not be here today as he is in quarantine. So he has sent something for his mother to get.
Good evening. My son has sent me a speech to deliver, and being his mother, I have to do a little talking first. Just to let you know that my father kept prolific diaries of what went on here in Somerset. And if you read them, you would never dream of putting black school, well, school for everybody now, but most people that go to the public schools in Somerset are black. And this is an offense. When I read his diaries, I don't know how he did it. I don't know how. And I will fight for him. Now, he asked them in 1962, before his retirement, not to build facilities like that. Foreign experts. He said, we are not in the Caribbean. Bermuda's weather is such that children go to school when the weather is cold, windy, and rainy. So I'm concerned when foreign experts want to build schools with open air spaces. Do they really know what the weather here is like? It ticks me off. Anyhow, in 1985, you were asking why were the teachers taken away? I can tell you, there was a meeting when William Cox came and I was there. The other school is better. Send your children there. Well, we knew why it was better. And Miss Margaret Manders, because she was a lady, went outside and said to him, anything that's black and strong, you want to destroy. It will not be happening at West End. In fact, she stamped her foot so hard, I thought she was going to break it. And if you knew Miss Manders, this was very uncharacteristic. So what did they do as her punishment? They systematically chose the teachers and removed them and put them to other schools. And you wonder why we're mad? I'm damn mad. Now, I'll come down and read what my son asked me to do. He's going to be upset I did that. Still is thunder. I am deeply saddened, he says, and hurt by the decision to close this iconic Sans Black institution of learning. 150 years, 2 years of history thrown away with the stroke of a pen. We who grew up in Somerset know what West End means to our families, to our island, and to the community. We who went to West End know it molded us, shaped us, and gave us the foundation we needed to succeed wherever we went and whatever we did. I think of my grandfather, who originally rode his pedal bike all the way from St. George's, Monday to Friday, until he eventually became a boarder with the Foley family. And I'll explain why he did it. He was the principal of East End School. East End has the oldest PTA because he started it. He was transferred to West End, and he was hoping that they would take him back, but they didn't. So that's why West End has the oldest continuous, because it has lived longer. It's maintained its PTA. Anyhow, oh Lord, where am I here? I think of the many lives he shaped and the impact that he made on our community and our island through his leadership at West End. I think of what we have that future generations will never have and never know. Legacy is important. History is important. Our community is important, and it should not be cast aside like trash. It should be elevated, preserved, and celebrated. As a Progressive Labour Party Member of Parliament, I'm not going anywhere. I have a deep loyalty to my conscience, to the people who elected me and gave so much to me. It has been said that the best decisions are the ones that can easily be changed. Together we can stand for our history, our culture, and say in one voice, not here, not today, not ever. West End Primary forever.
Good evening, all. My name is Norwood Simmons. I'm not a former student of West End School, but I had children go there 40 years ago, and I'm part of the PTA, but my parents went to West School, and my grandmother went to West End School. She started up here to Sunday school in Stoves, and she was born in 1998. So I've got some history in my family. 1898. 1898. So I've got some connection. My role is to field any questions and any comments that you might have that the group might use going forward. And so the floor is open, the bleachers is open for comments or questions. Yeah, if you raise your hand and we can get the mic to you.
We'd love to hear more from the rest of the community, so please speak up. This is your time to say what you feel. But I will speak as well, given this opportunity. In March, I submitted a 10-page submission on behalf of the West End School. I don't have to tell you, most of you, maybe I do, how deep the roots are for me in the school. Some of you may have heard me on the radio on Friday. I couldn't sit there and hear some things I was hearing and just take it. And so I was motivated to get on there and say a few things. This is about legacy. And it is about living legacy. We don't have to be dared to talk about our legacy. And we don't put it in a book and hope somebody might get around to reading it, or entrust or hope that somehow the stories get told. We don't work that way, most of us. And there's legacy upon legacy upon legacy in Warwick Academy, in Soltis Grammar, in Mount St. Agnes, in the Bermuda High School for Girls. We haven't had legacy, we tell it in our stories, but some people, as I think I said, you may have even heard me say this to Mr. Blakeney, and it was a light moment in the conversation. I asked him, what happens when you're going to the story of tech? And he said, I hope I go to heaven. And I basically hope he does too. I hope we all go to heaven. But the reality is that our stories often go to the grave with us. And they do need to be written, yes, but they also live, and especially do they live in schools, because schools are communities. They are a community, and we have 15 decades of community in this school. intergenerational, it goes on and on. And so I'll share my generational story. My grandmother, Sweeting, taught at West End School. One of the first teachers, one of the early teachers. Her sister-in-law, Mrs. Gladys Dean, taught there. She was Mrs. Barrowmanger and Mrs. Maud Bassett's sister. Mrs. Maud Bassett is 102 years old, and she's a very good friend of our family. Mrs. Erla Dean is a cousin-in-law. But let me then come to my own family. My mother gave 46 years to the school, became the headmistress for the last 11, and went through a lot of indignity, but nothing close to what Mr. Snaith went through, or Mr. Richards. But she was the deputy principal for a very long time in the junior school, then in the regular school, the full school, and then became the principal. I am grateful to this community because she loved my mother. I feel it every day. People say things to me, and when they tell me I look like my mother, when I think I look like my father, that's a whole other story. But I am pleased to look like both, because the two of them worked hand in hand for this school. So, when I finished my submission and got no acknowledgement, I sent it to 6 MPs.
Together, I felt that it was a done deal even way back when. But these questions that were raised, that you read out here tonight, they are questions that I think really poke at the core of the issue. This is a school that is the fabric and the nuts and bolts of this community. We cannot ignore the injustices of the past. We've got to make sure that the legacy that our forefathers put in that school and has impacted the lives of so many of us that's come behind them never is lost. Never is lost. So I would appeal to this group. I don't know what the plans are after this. If it's got to be a protest march, count me in. I'll be right up front, standing side by side, if this is the plans of this group. Thank you for your time.
Any more comments? Thank you, Senator Jones.
Over here.
Good evening, folks. My name is Patrick Mead. I'm a freelance writer. Once worked for the Gazette, still occasionally do as well with my friend Trevor. I'm actually not an alumnus of West End, but I'm a lifetime resident of the parish. I actually went to the White Seal. I went to Somerset Primary, so to speak. My sister went to West End. My father went to West End. I would suggest my grandparents went to West End as well. However, for whatever reason, my parents wanted to separate the siblings, and I was granted the opportunity to go to Somerset Primary. And quite truly, I was never really allowed to live it down by much of the community, most of which were West End students. So I was sitting home, and Trevor was starting this live feed, and I knew there was something going on here. And I was sitting home, and I was harboring some residual reservations, perhaps some residual hard feelings towards how I was, done so in perhaps a reverse way, and was somewhat made to feel somewhat ostracized. Became something of perhaps a socioeconomic misfit, because not only did I go to Somerset Primary, I was fortunate enough to in gaining education there, to earn a free ride to Salters, which meant I was denied the opportunity to go to Berkeley, which was my first choice. So I was being constantly denied, some by my own doing, some by the doings of of my folks, but they did what they thought was best. So, as I said, I became something of a misfit, and I grew up, I hung around with Portuguese because that's where I kind of fit in, because they was a bit misfits as well. They didn't quite belong. So I got where I, felt I could get in. And it wasn't really, but the saving grace perhaps was that I was pretty darn good in football, and my father was also the coach of Somerset Cricket Club. So I was able to come to Somerset and play football. And of course I played football with all the skillers from West End. So in that way I became, part of the crew. But I say all that to say that even with my residual hard feelings and stuff, there was always a part of me that would stand back and simply admire the camaraderie, the togetherness, and the stick-to-itiveness of all the West End students, and I really, wanted to be a part of that. And like I said, I had some reservations, I had some hard feelings, and I said, let me go listen to these characters from West End, see what they're all about. And but in listening, I've been able to digest and to be fed with a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the emotion, a lot of the attachments, a lot of the goodwill that exists, among our black folks, and to be inspired and to have my mind better conditioned to a level of acceptance, whereby I can overcome those feelings that I may have had, and to really rally in support of that which you're doing, because, Somerset is majority black place, West End is a pillar of this community, as is saying secondary, and those were schools, I stay up Mickey D, I've lived up there all my life, I couldn't help but see, what was going on, but, I was on the fringes, and I desperately wanted to come here, and I also had to pay a debt to Somerset Cricket Club, because that became my ear, and I just want to say that I support, I appreciate you guys, and really the fight, my sport, because it was, in listening, and I also happened to be at Somerset Primary during the period when they closed Burrs Island. And that was kind of like Christmas for me at Somerset Primary, because, I played football and stuff, and before Burrs Island came, we couldn't win a game, my man. Burrs Island came, we won Triple Crown champions, we won the league, we won the knockout, we won the six-a-side, I'm still got the pictures at my house. We won everything, So I'm thankful to the Burrs Islanders as well. So thank you, that's my piece for tonight. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Patrick, I want to give you such a big hug. The thing is, I can't do it because of COVID. But as soon as I can, you're going to get a big hug. You know why? And I'm just going to say, you shared so much straight from your heart, and from so much pain. I just want to say I'm sorry, even if it's not me who needs to tell you that, but I'm telling you, I'm sorry. I heard a story yesterday. I think I'm going to take a risk, because I don't think this young lady's going to mind. She didn't come tonight. This rocked me yesterday, because it became real personal. I said, only God sets this stuff up. There's a young woman in Somerset who went to Somerset Primary before the amalgamation, so probably around the time you were there. She told me she went in 1966. And as a result of her going, she was probably one of the first, she was amongst the very first black children to go into Sandy's grammar. When she said, I went to Sandy's grammar, I was like, She said, yes, Sandy's grammar, before it became Somerset Primary. And she said there was probably about 10 children maximum across the whole school at that time. And there was her sister who was there at the same time. She told me yesterday how she was called the N-word. She was called a Black Sambo and any other name. She sat out on a bench and was ignored a lot during her days. So she envied the fact that West End children could go on field trips and stuff. She used to hear about that from her cousins and everybody. The only reason she went there was because at the time, she and her sister, at that time, West End was so full, had 500 and something children. So it's no problem now, there's 84, sorry. But anyway, over 500 children, and they couldn't take her. And also Bose Island filled up, and they couldn't take her there, so that's why she ended up there. Then she went on to say, and I will never forget your sister Chrissy. Now, this gets close to my heart too. I spent my whole career in special education because of my sister, growing a program, the Child Development Program, because I know the importance of early intervention with people with special needs. Because my sister was never offered an education in the whole system for her whole life. Some of us have siblings that went through that because she had a disability. So she was at home. And I was off at Berkeley at that point, in that year, that she's telling me about. And she said about, I guess, 3 lots over from my house, her grandfather lived. And so she went to visit every day for have her lunch. And she said, my sister and I played with your sister during lunchtime every day because nobody would play with us at school. That's the legacy. You can't put our children in that setting. Yes, we want to move on and heal. We have to. But you won't heal a people by re-traumatizing them when they have to revisit a negative past. You won't. It's time for this to stop. Yes, the pain has to stop. We have seen this as an opportunity for the government to make reparations for the past. If you rebuild the site, West End, you will reward the Black community for what hard, awful things they've been through over time. For their efforts, and you'll say thank you at last for all the Black fathers and mothers and grandmothers and way back. You'll say thank you to our ancestors. That's a great thing. You'll also help the white community to be able to get past the pain that many of them feel when they recognize they didn't do this right towards other human beings. The people who are white, who have wanted to be with Black people, have been with Black people all along at West End and at Somerset Primary. If you put them all together at West End in a new building, everybody wins. That's what we proposed, but we were ignored. We can't figure it out. And we certainly can't figure it out from this government. That, frankly, West End, for generations, put people in the PLP in place. Yeah. And we put you in place this time, too, with joy. So we don't understand. We really don't. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep taking too much time, but I gotta go. I gotta wrap up. Okay. First of all, I want to say this. We did receive apologies from our MPs. From MP Dennis Lister, who's the Speaker of the House. He had a very important engagement tonight. I don't think he'll mind me telling you that he's celebrating his 40th wedding anniversary, and we think that's good. MP Kim Wilson is abroad, and MP Scott Simmons was working tonight, but he has indicated his clear support for keeping West End open. So I want to thank, we already acknowledged the MPs who are here. We want to thank you for coming tonight. MP Simmons, MP Caesar, Senator Jones, we thank you for being here and for listening to this appeal. We ask you to be here to listen. I'm sorry, MP Wade as well, thank you. Sorry. And we want to thank Glenn Bascom, Ellen Kate Horton, Philip Parenti, Diane Hunt, Yolanda Bashir, Cecily Simmons, and MP Jamal Simmons in absence for your part in this. We want to thank all of you who have shared this evening. Especially do I want to thank you, Patrick. And we thank all of you who have attended. In large, if not total measure, without our request for investment in West End site, we're asking for reparations. I'm just saying that one more time. We want to thank the media, also for being here, very much so. And we are asking why our community needs to endure re-traumatization because of the decision that exists at the moment. We will stand in defense of our West End Primary School for as long as it takes. We are here for the long haul. With these actions, we are not just reaching out for Sands Parish either. We are reaching out from Sands Parish to insist that valuable, living, vibrant community and cultural legacies are preserved. And I said living ones. Okay. Sands Parish is a unique community in no small measure because of West End Primary School's part in creating